Member Paulsen, thank you for representing me in DC. It's good to see you here. My name is Paul Thompson. I live in Edina, Morningside. And my question, no surprise, is about the climate. Last year, the House passed very closely climate legislation, and the Senate has been struggling with trying to figure out what to do, and now they've pretty much shelved the conversation until maybe after the election. Given that 2010 is the warmest year on record, and we're losing our ice cap, and there's been tremendous rainfalls and climate upheavals around the country and around the world, I'm wondering what we can do to form a bipartisan commitment in the Senate and in Congress to move this ahead. And also, where do you stand on putting a tax on carbon so that we can have something like a fee and dividend where there's a tax on carbon? I was in Copenhagen. Gasoline costs $7.50 in Copenhagen. People ride the train, they ride their bikes. It's the smart thing to do. What can we do in this country to move towards that kind of a society?
Well, I compliment Paul, because Paul and I have engaged in this dialogue for a while. He's real passionate about this, and I met with him a couple of years ago, and it's been ongoing over the last couple of years. And of course, the legislation is not without controversy, certainly, and obviously that's why it hasn't even passed, even though one party controls everything. It's still controversial because they can pass it if they want, and so it's really been hung up primarily around the centerpieces of the costs, right? And you talk about raising gas prices to $6 a gallon and the impact of what that might do in the economy, of course, biking, et cetera. But from my standpoint, given from where we need to go with economic growth, and our growth has been real anemic, I just really worry about imposing those types of costs. I mean, there's been anywhere between $1,700 average increase in family expenses, business expenses, to some other more larger estimates, and I'm not sure exactly what's the most accurate, but there's no doubt that, the bill is designed to raise energy costs, fossil fuels. I think what we need to do to bring bipartisan support, and I'll give you an example. I mean, Tim Walz and I, we penned a piece not too long ago in the Star Tribune to highlight nuclear energy. And nuclear energy in Europe, it's counted as green energy. I mean, that's one way of controlling greenhouse gases, and I think it's something we should be looking at. It's part of our making sure we've got an appropriate base load here, and if we're not talking about it now, we won't be talking about it to develop it in a few years, unfortunately. In countries like France, of course, have close to 80% of their electricity provided by nuclear energy, and it's something the United States should be doing. But we have to get into the pipeline, because you have to educate people, you have to have basically you have to have nuclear technicians, et cetera, and there are new technologies right now. But I think there is hope for bipartisanship on developing some of those alternative fuels, and I'm doing some other work with Colin Peterson, who's a Democrat, and Tim Walz, who's a Democrat, both from Minnesota, on, I think it's wind energy, solar, and I think we should do more with geothermal, et cetera. We should really expand all the options. I mean, we really should. And I think nuclear energy has to be a key component. Now, that was not a part of the House bill, but you mentioned that did pass in the House. And it barely passed. I mean, it had strong bipartisan opposition, it had some bipartisan support, but it didn't pass. And in the Senate, it's kind of stalled out. Right now, they're looking more at renewables, having a certain percentage of renewable energy by certain years, for instance, and having that dedication. And so I'm interested in looking at that, more or less, and I think you're probably going to see some more bipartisan effort around there. And we should talk more, too, after, if you've had any other ideas over the last year since we've talked last about
So do you support a tax on carbon emissions?
Oh, the tax on carbon. Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really not a fan of adding a tax on carbon or a tax on provisions like that are going to impact economic growth at a time when jobs are really key. I mean, the number one issue I hear about is jobs, jobs, jobs.